as people see that paradigm shift and as they're grabbing hold of it, they're like, nobody taught me about money. I didn't take a course. It was nothing in high school. Like I used money, but nobody really taught me about money.
Welcome to the Rotary Big Ideas podcast, where we celebrate big ideas that are sparking positive change in Ottawa and around the world. I'm your host, Bashir Bastien, and on each episode, we meet a change maker and their big idea. Today, our guest is David Van Noppen. He's a co-founder and owner of More Than Enough Financial Fitness, where he's dedicated to empowering individuals to achieve financial well-being and the freedom to pursue their aspirations. It is a pleasure to have you on our podcast. So tell us, what is your big idea?
Oh, our big idea. Well, it's glad to be here, Bashir. And as crazy as that sounds, my big idea and what we've been doing for the last 20 years has to see a debt-free Canada. Every family in Canada able to live debt-free. That's the big idea. That's the big challenge. And yeah, we're on a mission to do that.
So the question that I have for you is, what inspired that big idea?
Well, that really goes back. It actually snuck up a little bit on me in the sense that I started my entire career as a young man in the automotive industry. I was a mechanic. My father owned a garage. As is a bit typical in a family business, you graduate through. We opened a second business, so we had two garages, and we were reorganizing the business, and I found myself kind of reorganizing myself out of the business and wondering what was next. So I'd been in the automotive industry for about 25 years. And as we reorganized the business, there was a career transition there for me. And it really came out of one conversation where a friend called me up and said, I'm fighting with my wife over money. And I actually knew a finance person who had this idea to meet one-on-one with people to help them just navigate the relationship with money. And so I knew her. I called her up. I said, I have this friend, and this friend needs help. And she said, sure, Dave, I heard you're unemployed. Are you sure the friend isn't you? And I said, no, it's not me, but I have this friend. And so as she shared her vision, she had been really preaching the message of getting control. This is back in 2008, 2009. There was a significant shift in financial world. I was a bit oblivious at the time, but the more that we spoke, the more that she shared her heart, the more I realized this is something that we need to do. There's very few voices and to be honest, a little technique around how do you live in a debt-free society when everything is pushing you to spend more money than you actually have and access to credit to do it. So how do we do that? So that started the journey 20 years ago, and we've spent the last 20 years meeting one-on-one with the Canadian family and saying, let's start with the foundational pieces. Let's start with cash flow management. Let's start with the relationship with money that we have. Let's talk about the dangers of debt and the burden that causes. So we started realizing that it's not, this topic of a debt-free Canada is really about a relationship with money and how we can relate and what that means on the day-to-day. So that's what we do. We really start with the cash flow, and that's, again, I'm passionate about that, to see the family just released from the burden of debt, because we see it destroy families, we see it destroy relationships. Statistically, Bashir, we see money kind of blamed for, we know 50% of marriages are breaking up here in Canada. Money is the top 2 or 3 reason, and I put reason in quotes because it's not the reason. It's about the relationship. It is actually the outward expression. So that's how the beginning started.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing. There's a lot to unpack here. The first thing I'd like to ask, from the automotive industry to finance, so I wonder what was the biggest challenge that you had to face to do that transition?
I sometimes feel like it's penance, right? So I spent the first 25 in my first career putting people into debt over car repairs. We all hate, car repairs, and now I've spent the last 20 years helping people navigate that, right? Getting out of debt. So sometimes I laugh and I say it's about penance, but really where the transition for me happened was I had spent a lot of my management career learning about mentoring, and in the automotive industry, apprenticeship is a big part of how the industry works. And I'm very passionate about the idea of coaching, where you come alongside someone, and it's not about information so much, although obviously we need to be educated, but it is about implementation. It's we know what to do, I just can't consistently do it, or I need some strategies to help me navigate. And we talk about this relationship with money. It is fluid and it does change, and we have different goals and we give it different. So really, the transition wasn't that difficult because I was moving from teaching and mentoring and having an apprentice in the automotive industry. And I used all of those skills to create the coaching program that we now use for helping people move from, I'll say, maybe stress in their finance to some real significant financial changes. So it's all, again, I'm passionate about coaching. Financing is just the way that's expressed. And so
that's beautiful. And I couldn't help but notice that you've mentioned the word relationship with money many times. Mm-hmm. So how would you describe this relationship with money to somebody who's listening, who doesn't know, who's asking themselves, okay, what does it mean by that?
So when we think about it, and in a sense, step back, we all use money all the time, every day. It is integrated into every single component of our life. But often when we're just moving through life, we don't slow down enough to say, what does a healthy relationship with money look like? Is it just getting more, or does it matter how much? Again, statistically, if in Canada you're making about $75,000, that's enough to create what they call the happy factor, right? So you're not any more, and I'll put in quotes, happy if you make more than 75,000. If you make less than 75,000, of course, that speaks to, hey, we all have bills to pay. We all have some of the stressors related to that. And so, that's a statistic that we can say, all right, maybe we need to, in our relationship with money, we're sabotaging ourselves on the income side. I only graduated from grade 12. I don't deserve to be paid X number of dollars, or somebody in university who says, well, I just spent all that money on an education. I expect to have a higher pay structure. And that's wrapped up in how we view ourselves in relation to how we would actually relate to money. And I'll give you another example, because I think this is an extreme one, but an obvious one. 80% of people that win the lottery, all that money is gone within 5 years. And so that's a relationship with money indicator, because again, if the amount of money you have in your bank account is directly proportional to the amount of spending you do, your relationship with money, you're giving it power, again, so we can see all of those things from a relational standpoint. And each of us have a relationship with money that will impact how you spend, how you save, what's important to you, and the priorities that you put on money.
But now I think for most people, that would be like a paradigm shift.
Yeah, so one of I'll say it, we call them Daveisms because I say them so often. It's a Daveism. And one of the Daveisms that we say here around the office is money is simply a tool to help you create the life that you want to see or that you've been created to do. Again, depends on how you frame that. And so part of that first paradigm shift is actually taking the power away from money and saying it's just a tool. How I use that tool becomes part of that conversation, part of that paradigm shift. So how do we use the tool of money to create the life that we want to live? And does that mean I'm satisfied with being a workaholic and I'm generating lots of money? Or is it, hey, I'm satisfied with working the hours I work so that it provides enough for my family, and finding that balance there. So that's one of the ways that when we talk about relationship to money is just moving to it's simply a tool and learning to use that tool so that you can build the home that you want to build, much the same as any tool. And it starts with, what does that look like for you, Bashir? What kind of life do you want to have? And what kind of life do I have? Because that's individual.
I do agree. And that got me thinking, as a fellow life coach, so what usually we say is people we help, they are willing and unable to do something. So right. I'm wondering, how do you get those clients? How do you get them to say, you know what, I want to change? Do they come to you? How do you market your services to those people?
People come to us usually in a little bit of distress. There's something, and it's not always related to debt or credit. It might be related to, I'm in an older demographic, and I'm looking at my kids and my grandkids who are desperately trying to get into the housing market. And how do I help them? I have this money saved, I've got it invested, but I'm not sure that it's actually, and I want to help my kids. And so there becomes a tension there. Obviously, some of the clients that we get are in distress, and we need to help them deal with credit and walk out that process of eliminating credit. And for some of us, and these are the ones I love to work with the most, our young couples where they're just getting started and they're like, we realize that we are on different pages when we talk about money, so we just don't do it. And we've realized that that is a topic that is absent in our conversation as a young couple. And I love to work with them because then we can set them on a firm foundation, get them communicating and relating to their individual money stories, but their collective joined together money story. And that's exciting. So I love that.
That's interesting. I'm thinking in terms of a debt collector.
Yeah.
Sometimes people talk to us and then they blame everybody but themselves, to be honest. So they blame the banks, they blame, the credit card companies. So how do you, deal with somebody that comes to you that needs help, but then would say the banks are evil, they do this, they do that, they charge me fees, how do you handle such a situation if that ever happened to you?
So this is why we call it financial coaching and really what we do. So we don't sell product, which is really important to understand from an investment standpoint, but also from the different financial products. What we do there is education. The key to good or to stable finances is learning to live on less than you make. It is that simple, right? And so a lot of the tools that we get in terms of financial tools, again, when we think of them as tools, they help us to get somewhere. They help us to usually get there faster, maybe more efficiently. So, for example, a simple bank account, it's a tool that helps us collect the money from, say, our jobs. It sits in that bank account, and then it allows us to then pay bills and to see where it is. That's just a simple tool of a bank account and how that we use that every single day, kind of innocuously. But that's a tool that really doesn't do any, it does what it needs to do, and it doesn't have any side effects. I like to use that word. Whereas credit, for example, hey, that allows us to go buy something when we don't have the money necessarily. And again, I'm going to be cautious to say not everybody that uses credit does so and doesn't pay it back or carries a balance, although we know statistically 50% of Canadians are carrying a balance on their credit cards for more than 2 months in a row at any given time. So the reality is that credit is a tool, but it's a little more dangerous than your bank account because it has side effects, and those side effects are called interest. And so that snowballs against you. So recognizing, again, I often ask this question when I do seminars: how many people in the room have taken a course on how to use a credit card? And the answer is always nobody. I mean, we don't do that. But we get given a credit card at the age of 18. We're expected to know how to use it well and to use it appropriately and in a way that is not self destructive. And then we find out that most Canadians find at some point in their life find they're spending more money. They're using credit card not as a method of payment, but as a way to extend the month so I can get to the end of the month. And that's not a great use for the credit card, right? And so, credit card is a convenient way to pay for things. That's what it was designed to do. It wasn't designed to extend your month when you run out of money at the end of the month. So those are some things that we do to help educate, but also then implement that. And we work with the clients to really keep them accountable on how they're using credit and again, getting to the end of the month, living on less than you make.
I'm taking notes. I mean, there are two big lessons. So the first one is money is a tool.
Yeah.
Second of all, live below your means.
Yeah. And they sound simple, but it is a challenge. That is a massive challenge for us, especially because of the access to credit that we have. Is very easy to live beyond your means, and again, we recognize using that 75,000. Not everybody makes 75,000, and so what about that demographic that isn't? How do they learn to manage that with all of the stressors that are going on? And so again, that's really where we focus on, and going back to our big idea. Then when we learn to do that, we can start reeling back that credit and see Canada living, the Canadian family living debt free.
It's making sure you use those credit cards as a tool.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, the appropriate use of credit, I say it like this, Bashir: credit is a burden, right? Again, and so when we think of it as a burden, I have some capacity. If I think of it as a backpack, depending on who I am, I have a certain capacity to carry some weight in that backpack. And so, the debt we carry is in our backpack, and it's going to slow us down if we're walking through the journey of life and we're carrying a huge load of debt in our backpack. That's going to slow us down. It's going to change our mobility. We're not going to be able to travel as far, even though maybe at the beginning of our journey, we thought, oh, this really will accelerate. The burden then becomes overwhelming and just buries us. So is there an appropriate amount of debt that you could carry and it not be? Yeah, that's quite possible. My mission, of course, is to say we want to use credit as a tool responsibly. And one of the statistics that drives me is that so many charitable organizations and not-for-profit organizations like the Rotarians, they're struggling with their own ability to do the good work that they want to do. They're struggling with that because there's not enough money. And yet, when I look at it statistically, I see that about 11% of the Canadians' net disposable income is spent servicing their debt. And only 0.6% is going to any charity in Canada. And I would just love to see those two numbers switch. Let the banks, run their businesses with a margin of 0.6, and let those charities and those not-for-profits that are doing such great work in our communities efficiently. They're doing it well. They're doing it on a shoestring. And that switching those two statistics around would really change our communities. It would change the fabric of Canada, because we'd have more than enough to be able to do those things that are really important to do.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very important. There are people who just say, I'm never going to get a credit card. I'm never going to get debt.
Right.
I'm never, if I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to buy it in cash. What would you say
Sure.
to people?
This is a bit of, you talk about a paradigm shift. Often when I talk to clients who are very credit averse, we recognize that the world we live in is based on credit. When we talk about what can we do to live outside of that credit or that debt base, it means making different decisions. And sometimes those decisions actually extend beyond your life. So you'll get the first generation that's going to build up some wealth, that are going to work hard. And we see this with immigrants quite a bit. Immigrants come in, they work really hard, and that first generation is renting, they are being efficient, they're staying away from credit, but they're building some wealth in terms of through hard work. And then the second generation, again, so sometimes when we talk about, we might not be able to buy a house, but we can certainly set the stage for our kids or our grandkids to be able to buy a house. And there's an old proverb that says, the wise man, he actually gives an inheritance to his children's children. And so for some of us, we don't like that answer because we'd really like to enjoy the fruit of our own labor. And so we spend the money that we could be giving to the next generation or the generation after that on ourselves. So it is a different way of thinking. And if you want to totally avoid debt, but again, we don't have to look too far back generationally to see that's exactly what humans have done generations back.
So, do you have a specific story of someone that has been impacted by your work?
Yeah, I have. I mean, we have all kinds. I'll give you a story. One lady called me one day, and I just happened to answer the phone, and she was so excited. She called the office because she had just paid off her last credit card, and she said, quite literally, I'm like dancing. Like I can physically feel the release, and then I'm like, I feel this. And so she was literally dancing on the other end of the line. I wish I could have joined her there, but we together on the phone we cut up that last credit card. Now, again, for those that are listening, that was her decision. She, of course, was on a mission to live debt free, and so one of the representations of that was her cutting up the card. So that's one, and that's such a powerful one because of her response and because it wasn't a significant amount of money. It wasn't again, it wasn't like she won the lottery or there was a huge windfall. That was part of the journey of a very long making decision after decision after decision after time in the same direction.
Got it. Thank you for sharing all of that. I don't know if you have any takeaway message.
Yeah, I think again, wherever you are in kind of your financial journey, if you're listening to this and maybe you're at the end where you're saying, hey, I'm thinking about retirement, or I'm thinking about what the next stage is, or maybe you have grandkids and you're looking at that and wondering, wow, how are they going to navigate this world? And seeing how you can help them maybe with that, or whether you're right at the beginning as a young person and you're listening to this and you're like, wow, yeah, I have a credit card in my wallet, and you're right, Dave. I don't know how to use it. I would love to see, and again, this is part of the mission, is that those that have traveled through life, that have gone through the ups and downs, and that have eaten beans and wieners for a period of their life, whatever that is, that they simply start to have these conversations around money and help the younger generation to really, really work through their relationship with money. And I think there's a wonderful synergy and a passing down of some of that wisdom that right now I think gets lost in all of our technology and all of the speed at which money is moving in our lives now, and looking to that. So that's I guess my encouragement to that older generation and the younger generation to say, if grandma and grandpa sit down and want to talk about money, you guys sit down and listen. If you're younger, if you're older, then take the risk and say, you know what, I'd love to take you out for coffee and let's talk about your money, and take the risk to do that.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for sharing this wealth of information. We enjoyed having you, and especially you had that shirt. You have the shirt at the back there with that
Yeah.
smiley face. Subconscious is making me smile, and I think I'm gonna ask my my guests in the future to have something there that can help me keep smiling. It's
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
pleasure having you, David.
Well, I'll tell you, on the back of that shirt, there is an acrostic that we use. It is financial awareness creates empowerment, FACE.
Oh,
And yes, we decided to put a happy face on the front of the shirt. So that's one of again, one of the Davisms that we say often is financial awareness creates empowerment. And that does lead us, again, in our relationship with money. Yeah, smile.
exactly. This is a smiley face. Thank you so much, David. Thank you.
No, no. Thanks for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for listening and watching. And keep in mind, if you want to make a difference or have a big idea to help others, Rotary is a great organization to connect with and become part of. Check us out. Until next time, then, when I ask, what's your big idea?